Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a management classic that has shaped the thinking of executives for over half a century. What separates the most effective executives from the rest? The answer may surprise you. It's not raw intelligence, charisma, or even technical expertise. According to management guru Peter Drucker, the key lies in a set of practices that can be learned and honed over time. In his groundbreaking book, The Effective Executive, Drucker outlines these essential habits that set high-impact leaders apart. Whether you're a seasoned CEO or an ambitious professional looking to climb the ladder, the insights from this book are invaluable. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll explore the core principles that can dramatically increase your effectiveness as a leader or knowledge worker. We'll delve into how to focus on contribution, make your unique strengths productive, manage your time like the scarce resource it is, set the right priorities, and make decisions that truly move the needle. By the end of this episode, you'll have a toolkit of actionable strategies to boost your performance and results. So let's begin our journey into the mind of one of the most influential management thinkers of all time. Get ready to transform your approach to work and leadership as we unpack the wisdom of Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive. Our first key principle from Drucker is all about focusing on contribution. Let me ask you a question. What impact are you really having in your role? Many of us get caught up in the day-to-day bustle of meetings, emails, and tasks. We feel busy, even overwhelmed at times. But at the end of the week, month, or year, can you point to the concrete value you've created? Drucker argues that the most effective executives ruthlessly focus on results and contribution, not just activities. They constantly ask themselves, what can I contribute that will significantly affect the performance and results of the institution I serve? This shift in mindset is powerful. Instead of simply doing your job, you start thinking about the unique value you bring to the table. It's about moving from a mindset of, what do I have to do, to, what can I contribute? Let me share a story that illustrates this principle in action. In the early 1900s, Theodore Vail took over as president of the Bell telephone system, which later became AT&T. At the time, the company was facing challenges and potential government takeover. Instead of getting bogged down in day-to-day operations, Vail asked himself a crucial question. What can I contribute that will ensure the long-term success and independence of this company? His answer was to redefine the company's purpose. He famously declared that Bell's business was service, not just making a profit. This shift in focus led to a series of innovations and improvements that not only staved off government intervention, but positioned Bell as a leader in telecommunications for decades to come. So how can you apply this principle in your own work? Start by clearly defining what success looks like in your role. What outcomes are you responsible for? What would make a real difference to your team, department, or organization? Once you have a clear picture of your desired contribution, align your daily activities accordingly. This might mean saying no to tasks or projects that don't directly contribute to your primary goals. It could involve delegating more so you can focus on high-impact work, or it might require initiating new projects or ideas that align with your vision of contribution. Remember, effectiveness is about doing the right things, not just doing things right. By clarifying your unique contribution and relentlessly focusing on it, you'll not only boost your own performance, but also increase your value to your organization. Now that we've explored the importance of focusing on contribution, let's move on to our second key principle, making strength productive. To illustrate this, let's look at one of the most consequential examples in American history. When Abraham Lincoln became president in 1861, he faced the monumental task of preserving the Union during the Civil War. In assembling his cabinet, Lincoln made a surprising and controversial choice. He appointed several of his former political rivals to key positions, including William Seward as Secretary of State and Edwin Stanton as Secretary of War. This team of rivals, as historian Doris Kearns Goodwin famously called it, was not chosen for their loyalty to Lincoln or their agreeable personalities. In fact, many of them had openly criticized Lincoln in the past, so why did he choose them? Lincoln recognized their individual strengths and believed that harnessing these strengths was more important than personal compatibility or past conflicts. Seward was a skilled diplomat, Stanton an excellent organizer, and each brought unique talents to the table. By focusing on their strengths rather than their weaknesses or past rivalries, Lincoln created a diverse and highly effective leadership team that was crucial in guiding the nation through its darkest hour. This approach perfectly embodies Drucker's principle of making strength productive. Drucker argues that effective executives focus on what a person can do, not on what they can't do. They ask, what are this person's strengths? How can we use them? This principle applies not just to managing others, but also to managing yourself. Drucker advises, to make strength productive is the unique purpose of organization. It cannot, of course, overcome the weaknesses with which each of us is abundantly endowed, but it can make them irrelevant. So how can you put this into practice? Start by identifying your own strengths. What tasks come naturally to you? Where do you consistently excel? These might be technical skills, interpersonal abilities, or particular ways of thinking and problem solving. Once you've identified your strengths, look for ways to apply them more frequently and effectively in your work. This might involve reshaping your role to play to your strengths or taking on projects that allow you to leverage your unique talents. When it comes to managing others, resist the temptation to focus on fixing weaknesses. Instead, structure roles and assignments to capitalize on each person's strengths. This doesn't mean ignoring critical skill gaps, but rather finding ways to make those weaknesses irrelevant by emphasizing strengths. For example, if you have a team member who's brilliant at data analysis but struggles with public speaking, don't waste energy trying to turn them into a charismatic presenter. Instead, pair them with a colleague who excels at communication for important presentations, allowing each to shine in their area of strength. Remember, no one is strong in all areas. The key is to create a team with complementary strengths, much like Lincoln did with his cabinet. By focusing on making strengths productive, you'll not only boost individual performance, but also create a more resilient and effective organization. Now let's move on to our third principle, which is absolutely crucial for any executive or knowledge worker: managing your time. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, where does your time actually go each day? If you're like most people, you might struggle to give a precise answer. And that's exactly the problem Drucker addresses with this principle. He argues that time is the scarcest resource of the executive, and yet it's often the most poorly managed. Drucker famously said, "Time is the scarcest resource, and unless it is managed, nothing else can be managed." He advocated for a systematic approach to time management, starting with a simple but powerful practice: keeping a time log. For at least a few weeks, Drucker recommends recording how you spend every hour of your working day. This exercise often leads to surprising and sometimes uncomfortable revelations. Many executives discover that they spend far more time on low-value activities than they realized, while important, high-impact work gets squeezed into whatever time is left. Let me share a real-world example of how this principle can be transformative. There's a story about Ivy Lee, a productivity consultant in the early 20th century, who was called in by Charles Schwab, president of Bethlehem Steel Corporation. Schwab was looking for ways to increase the efficiency of his management team. Lee's advice was simple: at the end of each workday, write down the 6 most important tasks to be done the next day in order of importance. The next day, start working on the first task and stay with it until it's complete, then move on to the second, and so on. Whatever doesn't get finished moves to the next day's list. Schwab was skeptical but agreed to try it. After 3 months, he was so impressed with the results that he reportedly wrote Lee a check for $25,000, equivalent to over $400,000 today. This story illustrates a key aspect of Drucker's time management philosophy, the importance of prioritization and focus. It's not just about being busy, but about being busy on the right things. So how can you apply these insights to your own work? Start with Drucker's time log exercise. For at least 2 weeks, record how you spend each hour of your working day. Be honest and detailed. At the end of this period, analyze your log. Look for patterns, time wasters, and activities that don't align with your key priorities. Next, use this information to make strategic changes, identify your most productive hours, and reserve them for your most important work. Look for tasks that can be eliminated, delegated, or streamlined. And like in the Ivy Lee method, prioritize your tasks, focusing on the ones that contribute most to your key objectives. Drucker also emphasizes the importance of creating large, uninterrupted blocks of time for important work. This might mean setting aside specific hours or even full days for focused work, free from meetings and other interruptions. Remember, the goal isn't to fill every minute with activity, but to ensure that your time is spent on what truly matters. As Drucker puts it, there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. By managing your time more effectively, you'll not only increase your productivity, but also reduce stress and create more space for strategic thinking and creative problem solving. It's a critical skill for any executive or knowledge worker aspiring to make a significant impact. Now that we've covered the importance of managing your time, let's dive into our fourth principle, putting first things first. This concept ties closely with time management but deserves special attention because it's so crucial to effectiveness. I want to start by asking you a question. Are you majoring in the minors? In other words, are you spending most of your time and energy on tasks that, while perhaps urgent, aren't truly important in the grand scheme of things? Drucker argues that one of the key characteristics of effective executives is their ability to concentrate on the few major areas where superior performance will produce outstanding results. They ruthlessly prioritize, focusing on what he calls first things, the tasks and initiatives that will make the biggest difference. To illustrate this principle, let's look at an example from the business world. Steve Jobs, upon his return to Apple in 1997, found a company that was unfocused and producing a confusing array of products. In one of his first moves, Jobs dramatically simplified Apple's product line, focusing the company's efforts on just 4 main categories. This decision was controversial at the time. It meant killing off products that people had worked hard on and that had their own fan bases, but Jobs understood that for Apple to not just survive but thrive, it needed to concentrate its resources on a few key areas where it could truly excel. The results speak for themselves. This laser focus on first things allowed Apple to innovate more effectively, leading to groundbreaking products like the iMac, iPod, iPhone, and iPad, which revolutionized entire industries. So how can you apply this principle in your own work? Drucker suggests starting with a critical analysis of your activities. Ask yourself, if we did not already do this, would we go into it now? For activities that pass this test, then ask, is this still worth doing? These questions help you identify activities that may have outlived their usefulness but continue out of habit or tradition. Next, regularly review your priorities. Drucker recommends asking, what are the most important contributions I can make to the performance of this organization? Use the answer to guide your focus and inform your decisions about how to allocate your time and resources. It's also crucial to develop the ability to say no to tasks and projects that don't align with your top priorities. This can be challenging, especially when faced with urgent but less important demands. But remember, every yes to a low-priority task is a no to something potentially more important. Drucker also emphasizes the importance of setting posteriorities, consciously deciding what tasks you will not do, at least for now. This is often harder than setting priorities, but it's essential for maintaining focus on what truly matters. One practical way to implement this is to create a stop-doing list alongside your to-do list. Regularly review your activities and identify things you can stop doing to free up more time and resources for your priorities. Remember, effectiveness is not about getting more things done, it's about getting the right things done. By consistently putting first things first, you ensure that your efforts are directed towards the activities that will have the greatest impact. And this principle of prioritization is not just about personal productivity. When applied consistently, it can transform the effectiveness of entire organizations. It allows companies to concentrate their resources on the areas where they can truly excel rather than spreading themselves too thin. As we move towards our final principle, keep in mind that all of these practices work together. Managing your time effectively creates the space to focus on your priorities. Focusing on your priorities allows you to make your unique contribution, and making your contribution often involves leveraging your strengths and the strengths of those around you. Now let's turn our attention to our fifth and final principle: effective decision-making. This is where all the other principles we've discussed come together to produce concrete results. To underscore the importance of this skill, let me share a cautionary tale from the business world. In 1985, Coca-Cola made what is often cited as one of the biggest marketing blunders in history: the launch of New Coke. The company had spent years and millions of dollars on market research and blind taste tests, which showed that people preferred the sweeter taste of the new formula. Based on this data, Coca-Cola made the decision to change its century-old formula. The result? A massive backlash from consumers. Within months, the company was forced to bring back the original formula as Coca-Cola Classic. What went wrong? The decision-makers at Coca-Cola failed to consider several crucial factors. They didn't account for the emotional attachment people had to the original Coke, the potential negative reaction from loyal customers, or the broader implications for their brand identity. This story illustrates why effective decision-making is so crucial and why Drucker devoted significant attention to this topic. He argued that executives are paid to make effective decisions and that there's a systematic process to doing so. Drucker outlines several key elements of effective decision-making. First, classify the problem. Is it a generic problem that can be solved through a rule or principle, or is it a unique event that requires a specific approach? Second, define the specifications that the solution must satisfy. What are the boundary conditions? Third, start with what is right rather than what is acceptable. Push for the best solution before making necessary compromises. Fourth, convert the decision into action. A decision without an action plan is just a good intention. Finally, build a feedback mechanism to continually test the validity and effectiveness of the decision against the actual results. Let's break this down with a more positive example. When Jack Welch became CEO of General Electric in 1981, he faced the challenge of how to position the massive conglomerate for future success. Welch made a crucial decision. GE would only keep businesses where it could be first or second in market share. This decision followed Drucker's framework. Welch classified the problem as a generic one about resource allocation and competitive strategy. He defined clear specifications. Businesses must be number one or two in their markets. He started with what was right for GE's long-term success, not what was immediately acceptable or comfortable. He converted the decision into action by systematically reviewing and divesting businesses that didn't meet the criteria. And he built in feedback mechanisms to continually assess the effectiveness of this strategy. The result? Over Welch's 20-year tenure, GE's value rose 4,000%, making it one of the most valuable companies in the world. So how can you apply Drucker's decision-making framework in your own work? Start by consciously thinking through each step when faced with important decisions. Don't rush to solutions before you've properly defined the problem and the criteria for a good solution. Gather diverse perspectives and encourage disagreement. Drucker believed that disagreement is necessary for effective decision-making. It helps surface different viewpoints and prevents groupthink. Always consider alternatives. Drucker warned against making a decision without having considered at least one alternative. This helps ensure you're not just going with the first acceptable option. Think through the decision to action. Ask yourself, who needs to know about this decision? What actions need to be taken? Who will take them? How will we ensure they're carried out? Finally, build in a way to test your decision against reality. Set clear expectations for what the decision should achieve and regularly check if those expectations are being met. Remember, the goal isn't to make perfect decisions. That's impossible in a world of uncertainty. The goal is to make effective decisions that move your organization forward and create positive results. As we wrap up our exploration of Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive, let's recap the 5 key principles we've covered. First, focus on contribution. Always ask yourself, what can I contribute that will significantly affect the performance and results of my organization? Second, make strength productive. Identify and leverage your own strengths and those of your team members rather than fixating on weaknesses. Third, manage your time effectively. Treat time as your scarcest resource and be intentional about how you use it. Fourth, put first things first. Concentrate your efforts on the few areas where superior performance will produce outstanding results. And finally, make effective decisions. Follow a systematic process that starts with defining the problem correctly and ends with converting the decision into action. These principles, when applied consistently, can dramatically improve your effectiveness as an executive or knowledge worker. They provide a framework for not just doing things right, but doing the right things. As you reflect on what we've discussed today, I encourage you to choose one area to focus on this week. Maybe it's tracking your time use, or perhaps it's reassessing your priorities. Whatever you choose, commit to taking concrete steps to implement that principle in your work. Remember, becoming an effective executive is not about innate talent or personality. It's about cultivating the right habits and practices. As Drucker himself said, effectiveness can be learned, and it also has to be learned. Before we close, I want to remind you that the full transcript of this episode, along with helpful visualizations, is available at ceoslibrary.com. And if you found value in today's discussion, I highly recommend picking up a copy of The Effective Executive to dive deeper into Drucker's insights. Thank you for joining me on CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf. Until next time, keep striving for effectiveness in all that you do.